Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, San Francisco Native, where I talk about life and times of living in San Francisco. In this episode, I will talk about what it's like to live in San Francisco, California. As someone who has lived here since 1980, I feel qualified to give my thoughts on this topic. So what is it really like to live in San Francisco? Many people move to San Francisco all the time. I constantly hear people talking about their life and that they only recently moved here a few months ago for their new job. That's pretty much how I would summarize San Francisco for the past decade. It's become a gold rush town for all things technology and startups. As a result, San Francisco has had a huge influx of young people in their early 20s, straight out of college, and moved to San Francisco to start a new tech job at Twitter, Uber, Facebook, Google, Apple, or the many other countless small startup companies. If you walk along downtown, along Market Street or south of Market, you will see that many people are in their early 20s and probably straight out of college. In the past, it used to be that the Palo Alto area was referred to as Silicon Valley, which is about 40 miles south of San Francisco. That area, known as the South Bay, is also where Facebook, Apple, and Google headquarters are located. But nowadays, in the current tech bubble, Silicon Valley has extended north all the way up to San Francisco, including other parts of the Bay Area. As a result, many young tech workers prefer to live in San Francisco and take a long round-trip shuttle bus ride to the South Bay to go to work. Personally, I wish they would just live in the South Bay if they work down there. But that's just how things are nowadays. Because of this current trend, this has caused San Francisco to be overcrowded with an influx of new people, which in turn has caused a housing shortage and thereby raising up rental prices and new home prices. To give you an idea of housing prices, back in the early 1990s, it cost me $800 for a decent-sized two-bedroom apartment in the Richmond District neighborhood, which is a very nice part of town a short distance from the ocean. That same two-bedroom apartment would now cost well over a few $1,000s, which is probably the same amount paid for a single-family residence mortgage anywhere in the middle of the United States. According to some recent surveys, San Francisco rent prices is just as high as living in Manhattan, New York City. This in turn has resulted in many young people living in a room for rent, which means there might be 3 or 4 people renting a room sharing a flat and splitting the monthly rent. Otherwise, the full rent price is way too high for any one person to pay himself. So having multiple roommates has become the way of life for many newcomers. But even though a young person is renting only a room, that single room rental price could easily cost $1,200 to $1,500 a month, plus extra cost for sharing the PG&E utility fee and Comcast internet and television fees, and sometimes extra for water usage. A parking spot is not included and can easily cost over a couple $100s extra if one is available. I could go on and on about all the domino effect of the housing crisis, which has resulted in the gentrification of many neighborhoods, which has resulted in forcing out many longtime residents because they can no longer afford to live in San Francisco due to greedy landlords and the law of supply and demand. That is also the reason why there is a backlash from longtime residents against all the newcomers into San Francisco. It just makes life harder to afford staying here. So why would a young person want to live in San Francisco instead of Menlo Park or Palo Alto if he or she is working at the Facebook campus, which is about 45 minutes drive one way? For one thing, many large tech companies have their own private shuttle buses to transport their employees from San Francisco to the South Bay. This means if you work for Google, Facebook, Apple, you get to ride in a very nicely equipped bus that will pick you up at a designated spot, drive you to work 45 minutes away, and then drive you back home at the end of the day. It's approximately a 2-hour round-trip commute when you factor in that you need to arrive to the designated spot and wait for the bus to arrive. Plus, there is usually heavy traffic or accidents causing delays along the two major freeways, which are Highway 101 and 280. You almost have to ask yourself whether it's worth it for your time and energy having to make the 2-hour round-trip commute. For myself, I would rather live in Mountain View if I worked at Google headquarters, instead of putting up with a long commute. It gets tiring spending that much time on the road. But hey, that's just me. So then, why would you want to live in San Francisco instead of the South Bay if you work in the South Bay? That's the big question. My guess is that San Francisco has more to offer in terms of activities and social life, especially compared to the South Bay, which is a collection of small suburban towns. In fact, Palo Alto is the only city in the South Bay that has an active downtown nightlife and offers restaurants, bars, and shopping, plus it has an active campus life with Stanford University nearby. The only other town larger than Palo Alto is San Jose, which is about 20 minutes farther south. Although Palo Alto is a very upscale town, it still pales in comparison to San Francisco in terms of size and what it has to offer, especially for young people who want to explore what the Bay Area has to offer. Here's a piece of trivia for you. Do you have any idea what the neighborhood is like at the main Facebook campus in Menlo Park, California? The main Facebook campus in Menlo Park is built in the middle of nowhere, which I believe is in the middle of a swampland. There is literally nothing around the Facebook campus. No restaurants, no shopping malls, no Starbucks, literally nothing. So if you work at the main Facebook campus in Menlo Park, I really can't blame you for wanting to live in San Francisco, even though you have to tolerate a long round-trip commute. But if you work in the city of Palo Alto, especially nearby downtown Palo Alto, I think you're better off living nearby your workplace. But is San Francisco really that much better to live in versus the South Bay? That's a very individual question. Many people come into San Francisco on the weekends from all over the Bay Area for entertainment and fine dining. It's definitely a destination spot for a nice time. Some of the places that I like to frequent myself include the neighborhoods of downtown and Union Square. I especially like the Embarcadero area near the Bay, plus other hotspots like North Beach, the Marina, and the Mission. Each neighborhood has its own distinct flavor, including different cultures and activities. In addition, there's a lot of beautiful scenery in San Francisco, including Fisherman's Wharf, the Marina, Golden Gate Park, and Ocean Beach. If you happen to get bored of San Francisco and want to visit other places nearby, you can also go up north across the Golden Gate Bridge to visit Napa and Sonoma for its wineries and outdoor beauty. You can also visit Muir Woods and Stinson Beach and just drive along the coastline for a nice day trip. Or you can cross the Bay Bridge to the East Bay to visit other towns like Berkeley and Oakland, or go farther east to Walnut Creek and many other small towns in the East Bay. If you want to do an entire weekend trip, you can drive up to Lake Tahoe for the amazing scenery during the summer, or downhill skiing in the winter. Or even go as far as Yosemite for some great hiking and camping adventures. It takes about 4 hours one way to arrive to Lake Tahoe or Yosemite, and there's usually traffic to go up to the mountain roads. Personally, I like visiting nearby small towns such as San Mateo or Millbrae in the peninsula area, so I don't have to cross bridges. You can really get stuck in heavy traffic when you cross either the Bay Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge, so I prefer to avoid crossing bridges whenever possible. When I was in my early 20s and 30s, I really enjoyed driving south to the Santa Cruz Beach and Boardwalk, especially along Highway 1 for the scenic ocean views. There's also the quaint beach town known as Capitola nearby. It takes about 90 minutes to drive to Santa Cruz one way, but you should arrive early to avoid traffic. If you want to drive further south, you can also check out Monterey, which is a very scenic town nearby the ocean. While you're there, do the 17-mile scenic drive to Pebble Beach Golf Course to take pictures of the ocean and landscape. Anyways, these are just some of the activities that you can do while living in San Francisco. When you are young with lots of energy to explore the Bay Area, these are all the things that will interest you when you're off work. At this point, you might be wondering what I personally like to do for fun or entertainment while living in San Francisco. Honestly, as someone who's been here since 1980 and pretty much knows everything about this town, my attitude is been there, done that. The things I used to enjoy, such as partying and drinking with many friends and coming back home late night, appealed to me in my 20s and 30s, but not so much nowadays. I mean, hey, I did my fair share of pub crawls, chasing skirts, and partying at the Holy Cow and 1015 Folsom. Those were fun days. By the way, you need to be a local to know what the Holy Cow and 1015 Folsom means. So having gotten all that out of my system at an early age, nowadays I prefer to just hang out with the wife and enjoy quiet evenings together. I also enjoy hanging out with my friends or family at house parties. Many of my relatives live in the South Bay, so it's nice to hang out in the quieter small towns away from the crowds and traffic of San Francisco. I realize that might all sound mundane to you, but hey, I'm getting older, so that's my excuse. But don't worry, you'll get there one day yourself. Here's what I've come to realize. How much you enjoy living in San Francisco also depends on where you come from. For example, I grew up in a small suburban town. When I moved to San Francisco at age 14, it was a huge change for me. Everything about San Francisco was exciting and a new experience for me. So if you are from a small town and you move to San Francisco, I imagine that you will also find living in San Francisco to be exciting and a great change of pace. But let's say you are from Manhattan, New York City, and you move to San Francisco. In that case, you might find San Francisco to be rather tame and even boring in comparison. I've known people who are from New York City who have told me that they can't believe the bars close down at 2 a.m. in San Francisco, whereas in downtown New York, you can keep partying all night long. So again, it all depends on where you come from. Generally speaking, I'm pretty sure you will find San Francisco to be a nice place to live, even though it's expensive and crowded. If I were you and I got hired for a new job in San Francisco, I would suggest for you to come visit San Francisco to see exactly the location and neighborhood that you'll be working at. Then do a Craigslist search for apartments or rooms for rent in various neighborhoods to see what you get for the price. I would also suggest riding the local Muni buses to see what it's like to travel around the city in buses. But nowadays, a lot of people simply take an Uber or Lyft to travel to work instead of taking a bus. So you will need to allocate a budget for ride-sharing costs. As a longtime resident of San Francisco, I can still say I'd rather live here than anywhere else, especially anywhere in the middle of the United States. No offense to anybody, just not my thing. Over time, I've come to really appreciate the diversity of different people and cultures here in San Francisco. It's really quite amazing how all the different cultures can all get along with each other. For example, the Mission District is known for Hispanic people, Chinatown is known for Asian people, North Beach is known for Italians, the Marina is known for being lily white and extra expensive. That's just a joke. All the different cultures and neighborhoods all get along with each other really pretty well within this relatively small 49 square miles of space known as San Francisco. I much prefer to live in this coastal town nearby the ocean for the scenery. I still enjoy watching a beautiful sunset while sitting at the beach. I will never get tired of that. I have hundreds of beautiful beach sunset pictures. I just love taking sunset pictures. The weather in San Francisco is mild, neither too warm or too cold. That's because the Bay water and Pacific Ocean help to keep the water at a consistent temperature range. That also means it's rare for San Francisco to go above 100 degrees or below freezing temperatures. Most of the time, the weather in San Francisco is somewhere between 50 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit most of the year. So based on everything I mentioned so far, do I think San Francisco is the perfect place to live in? No, actually, San Francisco is far from being perfect. For example, San Francisco has a large homeless population, especially in the more urban areas known as downtown. It's gotten so bad that the homeless people are living in camping tents along the sidewalk in various parts of town. Many downtown city streets are dirty and sometimes littered with feces and used needles lying around the sidewalks. There's also more violent homeless people walking around the streets, in addition to the harmless homeless people begging for spare change. You really need to be on guard when walking around in certain areas. I also have little confidence in the direction of our elected city officials. They keep enacting new rules that allow for criminals to be set free quickly, and this in turn perpetuates criminal activities to continue unabated. The city is too lenient on criminals, and I find this to be a troubling trend. Hopefully things will get better, but I'm not holding my breath. By far, my biggest concern is the overcrowded housing conditions of San Francisco as a result of the current tech boom. Housing prices have become too inflated in relation to wage earnings, which has been stagnant for many years. If you're only earning $13 or $15 an hour in San Francisco, you're going to have a hard time living here. I find it ironic that it took a pandemic known as COVID-19, aka coronavirus, to slow down this red-hot economic boom. As a result of the current virus situation, many workers have lost their jobs and cannot pay the expense of rent. This in turn has caused a drop in rental prices. As of today, San Francisco is only at stage 2 for reopening businesses again. But due to a recent surge in virus outbreaks, San Francisco has delayed the reopening of businesses for a longer time. As a result, I'm guessing this will lead to further unemployment for a longer time, which in turn will lead to a continued drop in housing prices. If anything positive has come out of this current pandemic, it's that housing prices are starting to fall. So that's all I have for you for this video. If you have questions, drop me a note in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.